Florida has been sold to the world as paradise, warm winters, no income tax, endless sunshine, and a retirement dream millions of Americans have chased for decades. But right now, quietly and without much fanfare, something has gone very wrong inside the Florida housing market. Home values are stalling. Insurance companies are pulling out entirely. Flood maps are being redrawn. And thousands of homeowners, people who moved here to retire, to live cheaply, to finally breathe, are now trapped in properties they can't sell, can't insure, and can't afford to stay in. This isn't a prediction. The numbers are already moving. And if you own property, or plan to in any of the 10 cities we're about to show you, what happens in the next 12 to 24 months will matter more than almost any financial decision you'll ever make. These are the 10 Florida cities quietly headed for a housing crisis, and most people won't see it coming until it's too late. In this video we discuss about 10 cities one by one that are heading for housing crisis, and the number 3 city will shock you. So tune for end. Cape Coral built its identity on waterfront living. Over 400 miles of canals, affordable waterfront lots, and direct Gulf access made it one of the fastest growing cities in America. But that same water that attracted buyers is now the source of its biggest problem. Insurance premiums in Cape Coral have gone up 300 to 400% since 2020. Some homeowners are now paying $8,000 to $15,000 per year just for property insurance, before mortgage, taxes, or utilities. When Ian made landfall in 2022, it destroyed or severely damaged over 10,000 structures in Lee County. Rebuild costs ballooned. And the redrawn flood maps have now placed tens of thousands of homes in mandatory flood insurance zones that never existed before. Inventory is building. Days on market are stretching. And buyers from the Midwest who dreamed of a Cape Coral Canal home are doing the math and walking away. Comment if you live in this city. Fort Myers Beach was still rebuilding from Ian when this script was written, nearly 2 years later. What was once a densely packed beach community of restaurants, vacation rentals, and modest bungalows is now a patchwork of vacant lots, half-finished rebuilds, and for sale signs. The deeper problem, many original residents can't afford to rebuild to new FEMA elevation standards. Doing so would cost $150,000 to $250,000 on top of whatever the structure already cost. For retirees on fixed incomes, that math simply doesn't work. Many are selling for whatever the market will bear, and the market doesn't want to pay pre-storm prices for a post-storm reality. Property values here are fundamentally reset, and not upward. I hope you find this information useful. So don't forget to like the video and subscribe the channel. Punta Gorda attracted retirees for one reason: it was affordable. A peaceful small city on Charlotte Harbor with walkable downtown streets and reasonable home prices. Then the migration wave hit. Prices jumped 70% between 2020 and 2022. And now, the retirees who were priced out of Naples and Sarasota discovered that the affordable alternative is itself no longer affordable. Insurance costs here have followed the same trajectory as Lee County, up dramatically, with fewer carriers willing to write new policies. The city is caught in a squeeze, too expensive for the demographic it served, but not premium enough to attract high-income buyers who could absorb the new cost of ownership. Kissimmee became a speculative investor's playground. Proximity to Disney World made it the perfect short-term rental market, or so thousands of small investors believed. They bought in 2021, 2022, often at the peak, and converted homes into Airbnb and VRBO listings. At the height of the mania, there were more short-term rental units than long-term housing inventory in some Kissimmee zip codes. The problem: the platform is saturated. Occupancy rates have dropped sharply. Investors who modeled 70 to 80% annual occupancy are seeing 40 to 50%. Many are now cash flow negative, unable to cover mortgage, management fees, and HOA costs from rental income alone. When investors can't sell quietly, they'll eventually list, flooding the market with supply that local buyers can't absorb. Ocala was the internal migration target for Floridians fleeing the coasts. Just move to Ocala, people said. It's inland, it's affordable, and it's growing. And grow it did. But growth without infrastructure is a different kind of trap. Home prices in Ocala are up significantly from 2019 levels, but wages haven't followed. The local economy, centered on horse farms, distribution centers, and light manufacturing, doesn't produce incomes that justify current housing prices. The city now has a classic affordability mismatch. Prices are elevated by migration demand, but the underlying local economy can't sustain them without a constant inflow of outside buyers. When that inflow slows, there's no floor. Deltona was supposed to benefit from both Orlando's expansion and Daytona Beach's coastal appeal. Instead, it became a bedroom community with a growing foreclosure problem. Built largely in the 1970s and 1980s, the housing stock is aging. Code compliance costs are rising. And the demographic that was supposed to flood in remote workers and young families has been priced out by the same interest rate environment that's stalling markets nationwide. Deltona has one of the higher rates of mortgage delinquency in Volusia County. As forbearance programs have expired and interest rates remain elevated, stress is building under the surface in ways that won't show up in headline data until it's already moved. Palm Bay and Brevard County grew rapidly during the pandemic. Affordable prices, space, and relative proximity to Cape Canaveral's aerospace employment boom made it a magnet. But the city's infrastructure was already strained before the growth surge. Water system issues, road capacity problems, and a property tax base that hasn't kept pace with service demands are creating fiscal pressure on the city. More importantly, much of the buyer demand here was driven by investors and first-time buyers stretching their budgets with adjustable-rate financing. In a sustained high-rate environment, those are exactly the borrowers most likely to face distress. Gainesville's housing market ran on a simple assumption: University of Florida creates permanent demand. Students, staff, and faculty need housing. Proximity to UF provides a floor. That assumption held until investors who didn't fully understand the market started buying rental properties at 2021 to 2022 prices, assuming continued appreciation. Now, with rents flattening, operating costs rising, and a student population that doesn't grow infinitely, the math is tightening. Some neighborhoods outside the immediate university core are seeing owner-investor stress that mimics what happened in college town markets after 2008. The floor is real, but it's lower than many investors assumed. Tampa itself isn't failing, but specific submarkets within the Tampa metro are under real pressure, and placing them collectively at number 1 acknowledges the scale of potential impact. Flood-prone neighborhoods in South Tampa and Hillsborough County sit in areas where flood insurance costs have doubled or tripled. The condo market, particularly older towers along the bay and river, is facing the same special assessment crisis as Daytona Beach. And the investor-heavy rental market in East Tampa and some new Tampa zip codes is showing early signs of oversupply. Tampa is the most visible Florida market to national investors and institutional buyers. When stress appears here, even in isolated submarkets, it moves sentiment across the entire state. That's why it holds the top spot. Not because Tampa is doomed, but because what happens in Tampa echoes everywhere else. If you live in any city of these 10 cities, then comment your city's name. None of this should cause alarm. Real estate markets often experience corrections gradually and in a disorganized manner. Certain neighborhoods in Florida might maintain their value or even see appreciation. Some cities mentioned here will likely stabilize over time. However, the era of assuming Florida real estate is always on the rise has come to an end. The data has shown a shift. Now, the focus has changed from whether these markets will experience challenges to the extent, speed, and who will own the properties when that does occur. If you found this analysis helpful, there's much more to explore. This narrative is still unfolding. Feel free to share it with your friends and family, and if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up.